So, you want to start a podcast? Well, here are some top 3 things I would do differently before I started my podcast in 2020. Wait, let me go back. Oh my goodness. Since 2020, it has been 5 years, 6 seasons, lots of ups and downs, lots of interesting guests, and maybe 1 or 2 guests that I had to like take off the podcast because it didn't align with the podcast idea. So maybe top thing I would do, number one, is make sure all your guests align with the productivity or whatever nature your podcast is going to be. So if it's fitness, make sure they're specifically going to talk about fitness. If it's productivity, make sure that their conversation align with how things are going to be productive. Secondly, make sure that those guests are proud of their work. So for instance, you would have guests that at the moment you're done, they are so excited about what they just had a conversation with you about. It's just beautiful. You can see how the work that they're doing really brings them passion, brings them joy. They want to continue doing it. So sharing it with the world is something that they're really proud of. I can think of one of my really good friends. She is like the most brilliant person. She works, I name it. She's been there. She's one of my favorite casts, Columbia. And she just has so much passion for learning. She has so much passion for everything that she does. I can think of numerous guests who came on there, and you can just kind of hear it in their voice and their commitment. The same with me talking with Paul, and you can just hear it in his voice how much he loves what he's doing. That's the first guest for season 6. So just to make sure the conversation is consistent with what type of podcast you have. 2 is make sure that the guests are very passionate about what they bring to this world and also bringing it on to the podcast because it's going to show with how they have the conversation with you. And 3rd is make sure you continue to fix your audio. So that includes researching the best program to use for podcasting. I think I have settled on one of my best and favorite ways to like fix my podcast, the sound, because I produce, I create, I'm the one that cuts everything you hear to get to your listening ears and your watching eyes. I do all those. I usually do it on a weekend, like a Sunday, or if I have an off in the evening, I'll get all those things done. So I hope these tips help for you if you decide you want to be a podcast guru. And make sure it's also something you want to talk about, because what if you don't have a guest? So in the Gym Girl podcast, that's a podcast I talk only about fitness. It's just me. Well, because I love talking about those things, I don't feel like I need guests for that show. That show is specifically a point of view of what it's like to be someone in natural bodybuilding, doing fitness, like meal prep, all those kind of things. So it's very easy for me to get on there and like talk about it because I'm probably just doing those things already. So please make sure the things that you are bringing to your podcast are things that you want to hear, things that you want to talk about. Because can you imagine sitting in a podcast episode and it sounds super dry, especially if it's you that's talking? And you know what? Before I started on season 1, I would just experiment with all types of ideas of how to make the podcast feel like it's authentic. And, yeah, there will be days where I feel like I nailed it. Then there will be days where the sound is horrendous. There will be days where I just felt like I wasn't connecting with the guests, and that's probably on my part because I have questions, but it just felt like there was a disconnect. And then there are days where I felt like, you know what? This podcast episode could have been an email. So it does happen. Even those who are producing and making the podcast, sometimes we're like, I should have just sent this as an email on a newsletter, which reminds me, I need to start my newsletter. I did that one time and I just felt like the programs I was using to do the newsletter just seemed like a lot of work, and I want less work because I already do a lot of work. So if you or anyone else that knows how